music. You are now entering parallel universe.
And wipe your feet on the way in.
Marc Riley, BBC Six Music.
The fabulous Raincoats with Fairy Tale in the Supermarket. The fabulous Rob Hughes joining us from his flat somewhere, his penthouse flat at the top. A bit like Batman. That's our Bobby.
Oh, what an intro, Mark. Yeah, I am in my IRE flat here. So, we're looking at the NME, 27th of January, 1979. That is 44 years ago, Mark. Wow. The Raincoats, more of them later. In the news, page 3, Lena Lovitch, who made a British debut in the autumn as part of the 5-act Be Stiff package, is now set for her first headlining tour of this country, backed by her own band. As a prelude, Stiff release a new 12-inch single next week titled Lucky Number. Stiff described Lena as the Yugoslavian female sax player, stroke singer, stroke composer, stroke lyricist, who was born in Detroit and moved to London by way of France and Finland. Never mind all that, Mark. I know for a fact, as a teenager, she lived just down the road from me here in Hull.
Did she?
She did, yeah. All roads lead to Hull, Mark.
Right, is that why you moved there?
Well, I was sort of following her trail, and a few other famous musicians as well, to be honest.
Well, absolutely.
Yeah. Obviously, Lucky Number made her a huge... That was a signature song, made her a huge star, of course.
And, the story is, and I think it's true, is it, that she used to do some screaming for Hammer horror films. Is that right, or is that an apocryphal story?
I didn't know that. I'd like to think it's a true story.
Yeah.
Right. Well, you had her in session maybe 3 or 4 years ago, didn't you?
Yeah, she came in. It wasn't a session, but she came in and did something for us. It might have been like Fastermind or something like that, I think.
Right, okay.
She was great, yeah.
Next to that, the Buzzcocks, as is in NME's words, are back in the studios this week recording a new single with producer Martin Rushent. It's the Pete Shelley song, Everybody's Happy Nowadays, and is planned for late February release on United Artists. In early March, the band set out on their first major European tour, involving 12 dates in 7 countries during 19 days and 3,000 miles of travelling. So the album they're about to record, of course, was a different kind of tension. And it just made me realise how everything seemed to move so quickly for them in these early years. 3 albums in the space of about a year and a half, constantly touring, lots of non-album singles as well. They just seemed, no wonder they only lasted another couple of years, but they just seemed to be constantly at it.
Yeah, and can you tell me, have you got the tour dates in front of you there?
I haven't actually. They haven't released them yet.
Ah, right, okay. I think this might well have been the tour that Buzzcocks offered to the Fall to go and open for them. And I think that the Apollo was one of the dates, and we ended up saying no, or Mark said no, and Joy Division ended up doing it instead. I think that was that tour.
Ah, all right, okay. I shall find out later. Just below that, The Passage, talking of the Fall, The Passage have acquired a new drummer in Carl Burns, who recently left the Fall. The Manchester band are currently rehearsing with a view to going on the road shortly. I think he was in the Teardrops as well, wasn't he, for a while?
He was, yeah, Bank Holiday Teardrops, yeah.
And of course, this is 1979. He was in Public Image for a while, which I believe didn't go too well.
He auditioned for Iggy Pop in 1987 as well, and that didn't quite work out either. For the Blah 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 tour. An amazing drummer. Carl Burns, what a drummer.
Yeah, well, according to Wikipedia, he was rehired by Mark Smith a total of 9 times in total.
Well, with the revolving door, drummers aren't that easy to get hold of, are they? That isn't any disrespect to Carl, but I mean, Carl left originally. He wasn't sacked, but then he did come back, and I think it was a bit of a kind of a farce, really. But like I say, he's just one of the best drummers I've ever heard in my life. So I suppose you put up with that. He was a little bit challenging at times, was Carl.
But a great drummer.
Yeah, and a good fella as well.
One of the north of England's top rock clubs, the Penthouse in Scarborough, is to close in the early spring. It first opened its doors in April 1969, has presented such big names as Manfred Mann, Eric Clapton and David Bowie. Now there are plans for it to stage its final gig on its 10th anniversary night. Reason for the closure is that owner Peter Adams has decided to quit the music scene. There's no indication yet that some other benefactor is prepared to take over the venue. What a shame. I mean, as we know, Bowie supposedly played there with The Hype in 1970. knew what he was billed as. You made a bit of a pilgrimage there a few years ago, didn't you?
Well, it wasn't quite a pilgrimage, but I was.
You were already. Go on.
I was in Robin Hood's Bay, and we went to Scarborough one day, and I thought, right, I'll try and find this place, and I thought I'd found it, but it turns out that I hadn't. I was looking at another empty building. Oh, it's above a bank, so it was a little bit vague, but yeah, it was for that. It was for the Bowie Patreon thing that we did called Cheap Things, wasn't it?
Yes, that's right. Below that in the news, Crazy Cavan and the Rhythm Rockers set out next month on their first visit to America, where they kick off in style with a 3-night stint at the celebrated New York nightery Max's Kansas City, which is something of an achievement for a British rockabilly band, it says here. So obviously not really what Max's was known for at all, but it had closed, I think, in 74, had it reopened as Max's 2, but then it became like a sort of crucible for a lot of the punk and post-punk bands, didn't it? Played there.
It did, yeah. There was obviously, I mean, it was bigger and more plush and lush than CBGB's, but then again, most places were, you know. I mean, I played at CBGB's and it was rough around the edges, put it that way. I mean, obviously legendary, but yeah, it was the toilets and the backstage area were like pretty gnarly, put it that way.
Right, it doesn't surprise me from what I've read. I mean, was CBGB's, was it as small as people make out? Because a lot of it, obviously it's taken on this legendary large status, but I know it was, from what I gather, people who played there, it was absolutely tiny.
I would imagine, just from my memory of it, that it would probably hold about 300, maybe 400 whilst we were there. That's just, you know, yeah, looking back at it. But yeah, the toilets would hold considerably less, particularly if you would rather not go to the toilet there. But anyway, that's another matter.
Yeah, yeah. Anyway, Thrills, page 11. This is a slightly curious one. It caught my eye. Martin McNeil reports on a letter he received from Chrysalis Records explaining they were enclosing a photo and a small amount of copy on Steve Ashley, who is our new signing, they say, for which we predict big things this year. The main interest with Steve is that he's Marc Bolan's younger brother. His debut album is set for release in March. When Blondie tour in the spring, Steve will be the support act. I'd appreciate the photo and a few lines in NME next week. In return for this, I will arrange a Debbie Harry interview in late February. Best wishes, Jeff. So obviously McNeil here sort of smells a bit of a rat. He says he's never heard of him before, so he tracks him down, he says, to an address in Colchester. He says, we can now reveal that far from being Bolan's brother, Steve Ashley is actually second-hand record seller Steve Greenfield, who sings and plays guitar in an Essex semi-pro band called The Perishers. He doesn't have a record contract and has never had any connection to Bolan, except for the fact that the walls of his house are decorated with framed portraits of him. He and his manager helped cook up the hoax and happened to know somebody who just had some Chrysalis header paper. Says here, the playful pair are touting a demo tape around the record companies, and they believe an aura of mystery, however flimsy, might just help. Well, it did the trick in this case.
Well, you've got to mention on the parallel universe, Bob, so that's something, isn't it?
It did too. But the odd thing about this, there was already a Steve Ashley on the scene, a pretty well-known folk singer who'd been on the circuit since the 60s and 70s and had been in the Albion country band. So I think they could have chosen a different name, to be quite frank.
Probably.
Talking of Frank, Mark.
That's the kind of crap I come out with, Bob. Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
Frank Zappa. Yeah, dancing fool.
Yeah.
Go on, have a dance. I will. I'll dance with you, mate.
You're an Italian. Huh?
Could be slightly annoying, couldn't he, Bob? But it's a good tune. Frank Zappa, Dancing Fool. Do you not agree with that sentiment?
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of satire in there, of course. So look at the NME here, 27th of January 1979 on the film page. It says the Runaways are set to join the growing ranks of rock stars turned celluloid heroes. A film under the working title of We're All Crazy Now should be ready for May release in America. Directed by low-budget veteran Jim Robertson, it's a rock comedy scripted by TV writer Barney Gerard. It centres around the exploits of wait for it, an all-girl band on the up and up from their hometown backwater in Texas, heading for the traditional nirvana of American youth, Hollywood. For the more intellectual Runaways fan, their management promised the book of the film and a photo novel with wacky captions extracted from the footage. Oh, that didn't get made, did it, that? I'm pretty sure that didn't.
No, and I'm wondering if the management at this point in time, it was still Kim Fowley, which of course, I mean, ironically and sadly in many respects, the Runaways story did get told in a biopic, and Kim Fowley didn't come out of that very well at all, did he?
No, he didn't. He didn't at all.
Shocking.
Under that, also threatening an entry into the film world this year is Dolly Parton, who is signed to enter the studios with co-stars Jane Fonda and Lily Tomlin. The subject, a feature based on the 9-to-5 routines of these three secretaries. So by contrast, this was a massive success, wasn't it? And the title track, I think, won an Oscar, led to a TV series that went on for about 5 series, and lately a musical.
Right, okay. I've never seen the film, have you?
Yeah, I have. It's good.
Yeah,
good comedy.
I bet.
Producer Tony Lawrence claims to have seen the ghost of Elvis Presley during the filming of a made-for-TV movie called, appropriately enough, Elvis. Elvis will be played by Kurt Russell, his mother by Shelley Winters, in this Dick Clark-funded spectacular. This was a curious one because John Carpenter directed this, didn't he?
Did he? Right, okay, I didn't know that.
And Kurt Russell won various kind of awards for it. But the two odd things about it is that Kurt Russell, only found this out this week while I was doing research on this, made his film debut on 1963 on an Elvis film called It Happened at the World's Fair, and he played a little boy who kicked the real Elvis in the leg.
Wow.
And his dad, whose name I didn't write down, played the role of Elvis's dad, Vernon, in the film itself. Just an odd quirk or two.
Right, okay. And of course, Kurt Russell played in starred in one of the greatest films ever, The Thing.
Oh, yeah. That is just so great.
Oh, man, yeah.
Oh, I saw that. It was on over Christmas, I think, wasn't it? The effects in that, considering that was pre-CGI, are just off the scale.
It is. It's a whopper. It's a big old unit, Bob.
It is. Just like that Dusty Springfield song. Anyway. Danny Baker gets to meet Chic. He says in the Montcalm Hotel up on the fifth floor, Bernard Edwards is ushered in to his 15th interview of the day. He looks real business. Close tailored jacket, shirt tie, butter cutter crease in his strides. He pushes back his glasses and initially calls me David. Chic were formed 8 months back in New York, and like Steely Dan, are truly only 2 musicians who are using a group of semi-permanent members. One is bassist Bernard himself, and the other is guitarist Nile Rodgers, who's doing another interview next door. They both appear to be in their late 20s. Together they write and produce everything Chic do. Edwards talks very fast and confidently with a good smattering of laughter. He says, let me tell you, Nile and I are jazz musicians and both have studied classical music as well. I spent years with all this heavy stuff until things clear and you realise that a lot of what you're doing is just the same old ego tripping. Whatever you have in your collection at home, everybody needs a little Friday night, and really that is Chic. No big deal. Smile, dance, get crazy, which is a just great summation of all that as well, isn't it?
Yeah, what a cool fella.
Yeah, totally. And easy to underestimate the effect of Chic because, as we know, Nile Rodgers particularly just went on to become this mega producer.
Yeah, and funnily enough, last night we played Robert Wyatt's version of At Last I'm Free.
Oh, did you? Right, okay. We should also remember that Good Times by Chic ended up being it was the sample used on Rapper's Delight, wasn't it, by Sugar Hill Gang?
Right, okay.
Anyway, singles reviewed by Tony Parsons here. He likes The Members, The Sound of the Suburbs. Gruff, misunderstood, lost, neglected, sardonic, like Graham Fellowes' Jilted by Life Itself, laughing through gritted molars. An Anglo version of Pleasant Valley Sunday, he says. There's also Marlena Dietrich's Just a Gigolo. Says it starts off like Joni Mitchell on Mandrax and soon gets even better. Bowie's nicked more off this grand dame than Anthony Newley cares to admit. Beautiful. We should mention, shouldn't we, that this is from the film itself, Just a Gigolo, which was a stinker. It was a stinker, a right stinker. Yeah. The Undertones Get Over You. He said they turn out pre-immediate Small Faces R&B with a good Steve Marriott out front. Pretty much okay, but who really needs it? Lots of people. The Undertones were brilliant. As were, still are, Roxy Music.
I thought we were going to play Aswad then for a moment.
Oh, no, Mark.
No, this is Roxy Music, as you say, and Trash, which is great, off the Manifesto album, isn't it?
It is.
One of those tunes that could be an awful lot longer. It comes in at 2 minutes and 10 seconds. That is Roxy Music and Trash. The guitar playing on that by Phil Manzanera is brilliant, and the bass playing as well. I think it's Gary Tibbs who started off, as far as I'm aware, in the Vibrators and ended up with Adamant, didn't he? But
he did.
Brilliant.
He did.
Love that tune.
Absolutely brilliantly right. So look at the NME here, 27th of January 1979. On the road this week, you got Reckless Eric at Southend Technical College, McGuinn, Hillman and Clark at the venue in London, The Cure at the Marquee, the Trogs at the Nashville in London, Gillan at Bangor University, Adam and the Ants, just mentioned, at Norbreck Castle in Blackpool, John Martin at Swansea Brangwyn Hall, the Damned at Nottingham Sandpiper, Jake Thackeray at the Hare and Hounds in Birmingham, the Members at Norwich Boogie House, Elvis Costello in the Attractions, Richard Hell and the Voidoids, and John Cooper Clarke at Hammersmith Odeon. There's a decent bill.
Funnily enough, you should mention the Hare and Hounds, because that's where Lamo was tonight with their Independent Venue Week.
Oh, was he?
Yeah.
Right, all right.
Obviously, I mean, it's always on the tour dates that we get of all the bands that we play. But yeah, Jake Thackeray, all that time ago. What a history that place has got. Amazing.
Totally. The Skids play Eric's in Liverpool, talk about history. Richard and Linda Thompson at Reading Hexagon Theatre, and Frank Zappa at Manchester Apollo. Ooh. On the live front, so we started with the Raincoats, didn't we? Let's see, who is it? Ian Penman goes to see Raincoats, Dresden Banks and Vincent Units at Acklam Hall in London. He says, I can't remember anything about the Raincoats because I was hypnotised. It was so good, refreshing and challenging to have an all-girl group up there, not playing music and not male comforting roles. So important. Ex-Slit Palm Olive plays drums, although I don't know who else is in the group, but there's four of them: drums, guitar, violin and bass. Obviously Gina Birch, Anna De Silva and Vicky Aspinall. Must mention as well, I don't know if you heard it yet, but Gina Birch's solo album is just terrific. It's really, really something.
I just saw an email about it today, so I need to get on that.
Yeah, it's great. Next to that, in Manchester, it says it's the Buzzcocks, we were talking to these earlier. It says the annual Polytechnic Word of Mouth charity gig for Shades, a local counselling service. It says beneath the appropriately gnashing backdrop of Dennis the Menace, Buzzcocks turned in their most enjoyable performance in Manchester since the very early days. There were no tedious guitar solos, no Pink Floyd-esque drum routines. It was fast, rough, vibrant and so much fun.
And
were
I
you
saw
there?
it. Yes, I was. Yeah.
Right, okay. Wonderful. And very quickly, Public Enemy. No, we won't go into it. Let's just get on to Undertones, because we talked about them earlier, didn't we?
We did, actually, yeah. So we need to go. We'll go up to Gid with Get Over You by the Undertones. I need to say thanks to everybody involved in the programme tonight, not least you, Bobby Hughes. And yeah, we'll do it again on Thursday, won't we?
We shall, yeah.
All right. Cheers, everybody. Bye-bye.
Prepare to exit the parallel universe. Marc Riley, BBC Six Music.
And shut the door on your way out.